welcome back. Today we are talking with Treena Reilkoff. Treena, great first and second segments there. You got me thinking about situations I've been through in my life and friends that I've lost as well, unfortunately. So let's move to our last topic, psychological health and safety environments. Now, what did you mean by that?
My favorite topic ever. I would like to put it back to you first,
Sure.
kind of create some clarity for people if they don't understand the difference. So for yourself, Alex, do you know the difference of what is psychological safe workplace or a psychological health and safe workplace?
I don't know the difference. To be honest, I thought they were roughly the same thing. But
So, yeah,
I thought, somewhere where I could be open, I can talk freely, not rude freely type thing, but speak freely. If I have an issue, I can bring it up, or approach other people. But I didn't know that they're actually two different things here.
yeah, no, but you're right on the one. So what you described is psychological safety by the guru Amy Edmondson. So having psychological safety in the workplace is having that environment that is safe where you can speak up, you can ask questions, you can challenge if you don't understand or you might have a better idea. It's an environment where, if I said, I don't understand that, wouldn't that maybe be a little bit different or better if we did this? Or I don't agree. And then all of a sudden somebody's coming back to me feeling threatened, thinking I'm challenging their authority or it's insubordination, right? So psychological safety, and the great example my cousin gave me, he's an engineer and he now works in the nuclear field. If you go into a workplace meeting and you're having your team meeting and you do a round table and there's silence and nobody ever speaks up, that's a red flag, because that means it's not psychologically safe to bring up ideas, collaborate, ask questions. So in the nuclear field, you think if people aren't proactive at identifying conflict, disagreements, potential risks or hazards, the outcome can be death, life-threatening, the world destroyed, cities destroyed. So when there is silence at a team meeting, it's a red flag saying that maybe this team meeting, the environment is not psychologically safe, where people feel safe and okay to bring up ideas, ask questions, challenge what's going on, ask for more clarity. When we're talking about psychological health and safety, we're actually talking about when we're talking about psychological health and safety, we're talking about occupational health and safety risks and hazards. We're talking about in the workplace, identifying what is a potential hazard that is a risk to cause physical harm or injury or psychological harm or injury, and what protective measures are in place by the employer so nobody gets injured. So an example I like to use is ice, right? Everybody knows hazard is ice in front of the front door of your workplace, right? The hazard is ice.
I thought you were using an acronym for a second. Like,
Oh, yeah,
what's
no.
that stand
Oh,
for?
yeah, it's winter time or there's sleet and there's ice in front of the front door of the business or organization. Ice is the hazard. The risk is slip and fall. The potential for injury is it could be a bruise, it could be anything or nothing. It could be a broken, sprained ankle, or it could be death, depending on how that person falls and hits their head. It could be a traumatic brain injury that has changed their world forever. So what do organizations, business have the legal liability to do is mitigate that risk. They do it by sand, salt, signs, chip it away, block off the entrance, create another entrance. But by occupational health and safety, labor code laws, you have to mitigate the risk. Now, when we're looking at psychological health and safety to prevent psychological injury or harm, we're kind of looking at workplace violence, bullying, harassment, those kind of behaviors that create mental health disorders, burnout. But what's interesting here in Canada, under our occupational health and safety, is workload is considered a hazard. Workload means if that's the hazard, the risk is potential stress, burnout, conflict, mental health deterioration. So if your workload is too high, you're getting overwhelmed, the employer has not provided the environment or everything you need to meet your outcomes, or you're short-staffed, it could lead to depression, anxiety, which then leads to sick leave, stress leave, burnout, a mental health diagnosis, or it could lead to suicide if that risk is not mitigated. So how can you mitigate workload? Again, it all depends on the organization, the building, the business, the department, your profession, right? So there's no one-stop shopping, but you have to look at the systems, the policies, processes, and the people. And that's where collaborating to what is needed. What do employees need? If you ask them, they will tell you.
Well, how do you go about asking them? Because sometimes,
Yeah.
and I've worked at places, and I remember a manager goes, well, if we ask the employees, we might hear things we don't want to hear.
Exactly. And again, it's the same topic like mental health and suicide. We have to start bringing down the stigma and talk about it. So instead of being conflict avoidant, become conflict curious. If you're avoidant, it's going to cost you time, money, potential reputational costs, retention costs, and potential liability. If you're conflict curious, yet you might recognize and be identifying there's gaps and pain points that are serious and they're costing money, mental health of your people that are going to take stress leave. But now they've told you, and you have an opportunity to proactively mitigate it. So how can you do that? You know, people say a lot of organizations have engagement surveys. Engagement is one psychosocial factor out of the 13 that are used in a framework with the Canadian National Standards of Psychological Health and Safety, but they're also integrated into the ISO World Standards of Occupational Health and Safety of how to identify risks and hazards. So you engage in a culture audit, a workplace fairness assessment, a workplace risk assessment, right? You can name it different things, and even the name sometimes makes organizations, leaders uncomfortable. But the fun part is, the good part is, yeah, you're going to have some identifying the risks and the pain points. But when you talk to the people, you also identify your resilient strengths and you identify the solutions that come from the people who work for you.
It sounds so simple, but it comes down to one word, 4 letters: talk.
Talk, communicate.
Yeah, and it sounds so simple. So why is it so darn hard for us to do that? Because
We're human.
communication will trip you up in everything, projects, in any
Yeah.
organization, in any industry. Just talk. But why
Yeah.
do we have so many problems with it?
And learning to talk, right? And that's, again, it's like parenting. If you always rely on the employer to provide you the skill sets and the training to do your job or upskill, you might not advance to the levels that we need to be today, right? It has to take self-accountability to learn to communicate better. So two of the favorite communication upskilling that I like to teach and share with people to even go do your own research is with Chris Voss. It's called tactical empathy. He's a retired FBI agent. So when you empathize with people, right, you bring down barriers, walls. Tactical empathy, and he says he added tactical in front of it because leaders, CEOs, C-suite, they think empathy is soft. But tactical in front of it, now it sounds cool, and now it sounds like at a higher level. And if an FBI retired profiler and negotiator uses it, it must work.
Right.
The other one is the Neuro Leadership Institute. So they've created the SCARF method. So we're human. And if there is a threat, we're naturally inclined to protect ourselves, right? We go into the prehistoric brain, the amygdala, threat response, fight, flight, or freeze. Well, being human, when we communicate, we either communicate in a way that creates a threat response in an individual, or it creates a reward safe response. So how you communicate, the words you use, your tone, your volume, and how you prepare the environment all influence how that person receiving your communication is going to respond. And sometimes we don't think about how environment is such a huge influence to creating safe places to have hard conversations.
Mhm. What message would you have? Well, we've only got 3 minutes left. Yikes! What message would you have to leadership and employees to get together to create a safe environment? It's very easy for employees to say, "Well, managers have to do this,"
Yeah.
and sometimes the leadership, they've struggled to get there, and they're struggling themselves. So how can you tell someone who might be struggling themselves to change? So how do you go about making change, active, real change? Because you mentioned employee engagements, and I hate those things because
It's,
they only look at the top 5 or the
yeah.
bottom 5. So,
And that's only one risk factor. There's 13, right? It's looking at what I like to say is, you'll have the team meeting. Instead of doing, end of the team meeting where one person spoke, the C-suite or the leader spoke, and everybody else is silent, start a practice where you engage in resilient conversations, where you embrace a conflict or a mistake and you build upon it and you become situationally aware of identifying, here's the conflict, here's the mistake. What was the environmental context? What were the factors involved? Now let's brainstorm to prepare for the next time. Create that psychologically safe place. Do a resilient roundtable where you identify each other's strengths. When there's a conflict or an issue or a gap or, we all know people have strengths and we're the hardest to recognize our own strengths. So instead of always, in performance reviews, where did you not meet the outcomes? Where did you not stand up? Identifying that is great, but what about those strengths? Why do we not focus on the strengths and upskill? So it's having that conversation, but, breaking down some silos of status, having resilient roundtables, taking some ownership and accountability of whether you learn the SCARF method by yourself or you create it as a team learning. Right? But think outside the box because communication is what mitigates conflict.
I have an idea for you.
Curious.
I
What's
worked
that?
with a program manager for a while, and every time he had a meeting, he started off the meeting. You had to walk in. Everyone had to have a joke ready, and he would pick someone. Tell me your joke,
Right.
and everyone would laugh, hopefully.
Yeah.
And you'd go on for the rest of the meeting. Everyone's chuckling, in a good mood. And at the end, he'd pick someone else. Okay, what's your joke? So you'd always end and start with a laugh. And it was
And what
great.
the laugh do and the smile, it actually produces the happy hormones in our body. So even if you could be having the worst day, you looked forward going to the meeting because you knew you would get a belly chuckle and happy hormones would be produced in your body, which would then improve your mood.
Yeah.
I
So
like that.
shout out to Vince for that one.
I
Uh,
like that.
that I worked with. Treena, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you so much for sharing all this stuff. These are important topics, and it's even though we talked about school violence and suicide in the workplace, they're all interrelated, and you brought that all together in our final segment here about creating safe environments and ways we can do that. So I really appreciate you spending your time and expertise with us today.
Thank you. It's all a part of it. There's one takeaway. It's our generation now is the chance to create intergenerational conflict and trauma resiliency for the next 7 generations. So we all play a part and we're all accountable.
And that's the perfect place to end today. Thank you so much again, Treena, and everyone watching and listening. Stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.